Hi, welcome to Lawwiser. Today we would be understanding electronic evidence. We all are aware that electronic record is very crucial and especially for the businesses. Never know when there is a trial or there's a dispute they would get into. So they need to be aware of the business implications, the misconceptions, and the presumptions. To understand everything in and around electronic evidence, we have experts with us. We have senior advocate Mr. Vivek Sood, and we have Mr. Gautam Bhatikar. He's partner at Phoenix Legal. Thank you for taking out time for us. So, starting with Gautam, if you could very briefly explain to our audience what is electronic evidence and what is electronic record?
Well, I think I'll break that question into three possible paths. I think the first part I'll deal with electronic record as such. Thereafter, I'll deal with what is electronic evidence. And finally, I'll deal with section 65B, which deals with admissibility of that evidence. So, talking about electronic record per se, the Information Technology Act of 2000 deals with it in section 2T, which talks about the electronic record being the record that is generated by computers or any other electronic device stored electronically or in a larger sense transmitted. It could be emails which are transmitted from a person A to person B. It could be even photographs. It could be even, for that matter, videos, audios. These could be electronic evidence, electronic record in the larger sense. In addition to that, when you look at a dispute per se, when it comes to a court proceedings, what is important here is to figure out whether the evidence that is required to be brought into the court and how far that could be admissible in the court of law. In this aspect, section 65B of the Evidence Act deals in detail from subsection 1 to subsection 5 on the admissibility part. Quite a number of times what happens is when you are dealing with the admissibility part, while in India we follow strict laws of evidence, to a large extent there is a primary source of evidence and there is a secondary source of evidence. So primary source of evidence, the way historically we used to deal with original documents and the documents which were photocopies, which were primary and secondary, in the same manner the electronic documents are dealt with. So the originator or the author of the primary documents are the one who has either sent the email or received the email, or for that matter created a video or stored a video on his own behalf. If those documents are copied on CDs or forwarded by way of an email forward, then those will end up being secondary evidence. So proving a primary evidence as admissible in the court of law is much more simpler and straightforward than secondary evidence. In the secondary evidence, the law has prescribed a certificate to be included along with the documents that you file. So there will be a certificate under 65B which is required to be filed in court. You need not file it while you are doing with the evidence. You can even file it at a later point in time, but that document needs to be filed before conclusion of the trial. So this is broadly how the electronic records are to be maintained. In today's world, most of the transactions are happening online between two corporate bodies, or maybe cross-border transactions where you have emails flowing back and forth. You have projects dealt with by multiple people together. So in those circumstances, maintaining this electronic record, electronic evidence per se, should that company or should that project run into disputes, it's very, very essential. Now, primary evidence has of late become too cumbersome because the actual document that is stored by the individual is possibly stored in a server or possibly stored in a cloud. So getting that to actually at the time of discovery or inspection of those kind of data becomes heavenly impossible or practically not feasible. So largely the companies use the secondary data. So secondary data, you need a certificate along, which I just mentioned. So this certificate can be given by the author or by somebody who might be a information technology head of that company, who can provide that certificate as to how that document originated and what is the evidentiary value to that extent, which then can be brought to the court as evidence, and then the evidence could be led. In addition to that, there is also something called as the burden of proof as to how to prove it. There are two parts in that. The first part would be the existence of the document, and the second would be the contents. So when you are proving the existence of the document, the part what I already discussed forms very vital. And what remains in the second or the second part is predominantly proved by a person going into the witness box and confirming the contents of that document. So this is in a nutshell what is electronic evidence, what is electronic record, which largely is in this form. Lot of high courts and the Supreme Court also has dealt with it on the burden and other part. In addition to that, there have been also issues where the electronic evidence is not in your control but is in control of a third party, at which point in time you need to take the assistance of the court to send notices out. And if the parties who are holding this document are not cooperating enough, then the court can draw its own inference as to the admissibility of that document on the basis of its existence. Yeah.
Thank you, Gautam. That was really helpful for our audience to understand the background. Moving on further, sir, if you can throw some lights on how businesses today are relying more and more on electronic records as electronic evidence.
Taking forward from where Gautam left, I must start by saying that electronic evidence is very widely defined under the Information Technology Act, read with the Indian Evidence Act of 1872. Now, if you see the definition of an electronic record, it refers to the definition of data. And data includes everything digital and electronic. So whether it is text, or it is sound, or it is a picture, it is a video, so anything digital, anything electronic, which records any matter, in any medium, is an electronic evidence. So because of the broad definition of the expression electronic evidence, electronic record, all human activities today, or I should say most human activities, have turned electronic. And all evidence of those human activities, business activities, obviously becomes electronic in nature. Now, for example, let me try and explain this with the help of an example. There is a business and a contract is entered into for supply of goods or for providing services. Now, either a written contract is executed, even if it is printed on a piece of paper and signed, since the printing has been done from the computer system, even that is now, that is also nomenclature as an electronic evidence. So anything coming out from a computer system is electronic evidence. A video conference, a video chat, a contract coming into existence through exchange of emails, etc. It is all electronic. It is all electronic evidence. Even if I record the conversation, I have a conversation with Mr. X, and that conversation is recorded, even that is electronic evidence. So it is a broad concept. and it encompasses all business activities. Not all, almost all. Now, for example, in a contract of supply of goods or provision of services, I must say that the performance of the contract, the actual supply of goods, the actual movement of goods from place A to place B, it will be non-electronic. So that is a physical movement that is happening. So apart from a few pieces of physical evidence, I see businesses moving towards electronic evidence because technology has invaded human activities, if I may say so. Now coming to the disputes. Now disputes, in businesses, primarily there could be disputes, contractual disputes, or they could be employment disputes, within the organization. In contractual disputes, one part is the creation of the contract, the execution of the contract, the payments, etc. Again, all that is electronic today. So that comes within the domain of electronic evidence. However, the actual performance of the contract, the sale of goods, the transportation of goods, or the allegation that the goods supplied were defective, all that will be in the realm of physical evidence, or in other words, oral evidence. So businesses will have to classify the electronic evidence and the other evidence. So I see an increasing reliance of electronic evidence. Therefore, it is imperative for businesses, for in-house counsels to read the Indian Evidence Act, to read the Information Technology Act, and because these two statutes have to be read harmoniously. I very frequently observe that the new age businesses and the new age lawyers, they tend to forget the traditional principles of law of evidence, like the hearsay rule, or the rule of best evidence. So for example, there is a credit card statement. Now let me explain. There is a credit card statement sent by the bank to me that you owe the bank, the credit card company, X amount of money. Now, one element is the purchases, the shopping which I have done. So those are reflected in the purchases. And then there is a contract between me and the credit card company as to what will be the interest charge if I delay the payment, etc. And third is the computation, the calculation. Now it is widely believed amongst the legal community and the banking sector that merely filing that credit card statement in the court is good enough to prove liability against the credit card holder. Now that is not correct. See, the purchases reflected on the credit card is hearsay evidence. Let me tell you that. The vendor who sells the goods to me has to step into the witness box and say that these goods were purchased and this particular credit card number was used in my shop. Merely putting those purchases on a credit card statement doesn't mean that the purchase has been proved. So businesses have to classify, have to understand, the nuances of electronic evidence, physical evidence. There's something called object evidence also. Evidence of a thing. Now, for the definition of evidence, it is inclusive. It includes documentary evidence and oral evidence. Now, the weapon in a crime or the computer system in a dispute, it is neither documentary nor oral. So where will you fit it? But it is nevertheless a piece of evidence. So it is object evidence because the definition of evidence is inclusive. It is not exhaustive in nature. So therefore, these are the nuances, which businesses must understand while doing business, and especially when disputes arise with suppliers and other parties.
Thank you, sir. This was very insightful. If both of you can throw some lights further on what are the misconceptions and presumptions when it comes to electronic evidences, what is it that businesses need to be aware of?
See, there have been a lot of misconceptions per se as to, as Vivek rightly pointed out, that a lot of people don't at present go through the actual law and actual acts that are available, which is the Indian Evidence Act read with the Information Technology Act. So largely, what is actually needed to be known is to what extent the evidence is admissible. That's the primary goal, because eventually, if the so-called document is not admitted by the court of law, the document doesn't have that evidentiary value. So firstly, one needs to ensure that the documents which eventually will go into an evidence, like in the previous times we used to have original documents which used to be maintained, or maybe telexes and faxes that used to be kept and stored possibly on a butter paper, or what you call to be maintained for a longer period of time. Here the electronic evidence is already stored in either a computer or a server or a cloud. What is actually necessary at that point in time is to ensure that the data is maintained properly, because this data, when the primary source is lost, you have the secondary source which is available. So the misconceptions per se as to what is a primary source of evidence and what is the secondary source of evidence, a lot of times there is a bit of a confusion. However, there's nothing to worry about if the primary source is not traceable and you have the secondary source. The law still provides you with the option of filing a certificate on that basis, which I mentioned while answering the first question. So these are possibly the misconceptions largely when it comes to dealing with electronic evidence into courts or into arbitrations. In addition to that, what is actually necessary, because all this evidence that flows is from the issues framed in court. What are the issues framed and what is the burden that falls on a particular litigant, whether it is a plaintiff or a defendant? That is actually very important as to whether do you want to actually lead that evidence or not, is the question that is required to be taken at a pre-trial stage. So you need to maintain those kind of documents in that very fashion so that the trial becomes very effective, because eventually your whole case depends on trial and what you prove. Filing of the plaint or filing of the written statement is not good enough to that extent. And our judicial system has not evolved to that extent, wherein there is a documents alone proceedings or a documents alone arbitration, which normally is seen in the Western world. So we follow the strict rules of the evidence, and on that basis, I think the serious misconceptions of taking it too lightly when it comes to documentation, records and evidence is very, very vital when it comes to actually succeeding your case or demolishing the other side's case. I think that's very, very important when it comes to the misconceptions part. When it comes to presumptions per se, the section 65B deals with how a presumptions are to be drawn. What can be presumed as a primary set of evidence, what needs to be presumed as the secondary set of evidence. That again is on the basis of the burden of the proof that needs to be proved. So in every case, you will find in the issues framed to an extent that can the plaintiff prove so and so. So when you say can a plaintiff prove so and so, the burden of proof of proving that portion of evidence is on the plaintiff, and similarly it could be on the defendant to prove something else in the gamut of things. So that's again which is extremely important to ensure that the admissibility of those documents are easily possible and easily accepted by court under the law of evidence.
Gautam has rightly pointed out that electronic evidence is very lightly taken. It is not seriously taken by litigants as well as the legal community. So I would highlight two aspects on this question. First of all, I find that the evidentiary chain is overlooked. I will state it a little differently than what Gautam has done. He has done it in his own words. So I would say that the evidentiary chain is not taken seriously by businesses and the legal community. I imply saying that, for example, the author of the communication, the author of the email, the author of the communication must step into the witness box, first of all. Secondly, the executant of the contract, the witnesses of the contract must step into the witness box. Now, if some payments have to be proven in the court or in arbitration proceedings, then the bank witnesses have to come into the witness box. Merely filing the bank statement, merely an employee of the company comes and just exhibits the bank statement is not proof of the payment going from A to B. Then the statement of account that is filed, the accountant has to step into the witness box to prove the statement of account. Now, insofar as the performance of the contract is concerned, the performance witnesses have to come into the witness box. That goods were transported from place X to place Y. They left the factory on so-and-so date, under so-and-so, gate pass, etc. And how they were delivered at the destination by the transporter. The transporter has to come into the witness box. See, merely filing some account statement does not prove liability. The whole chain has to be proven in order to prove a transaction. Now, if you say that the goods were defective, then some expert evidence has to be led. Or the person who examined the goods and found them to be defective, he has to step into the witness box. Merely filing his report does not prove that the goods were defective. A report is only in the nature of a hearsay evidence. The report only proves that it contains the statements made therein. But the actual defects have to be proven independently. So I find that the chain of evidence is often overlooked by the legal and the business communities. Secondly, I find that 65B is not taken seriously enough by the business community especially. I find 65B certificates to be very cryptic, first of all, as if it's an empty formality. Just file it for the sake of it. I find on many occasions the relevant person who should come into the witness box, the person who has been managing the computer system, who has taken out the computer output, who has taken out the printout, etc. He has to step into the witness box. So even if that employee has left the company, then there are provisions in the Indian Evidence Act that if that person who was managing the computer system, he is not available, he cannot be found, his address cannot be found without cost and delay, then there are provisions in the Evidence Act which permit other persons to step into the witness box. Certain contemporary business records, even though they are hearsay in nature, are made admissible to cover these difficulties. At the end of it, I must say that the Indian Evidence Act of 1872, it was drafted by the great jurist, James Stephen, and it's a brilliant piece of legislation. Gautam will agree with me. Yeah. And it is so technologically neutral. It is very much applicable even today in 2020. In fact, I must say that the concept of asymmetric crypto system that was put into the Information Technology Act of 2000 is no more prevalent. It had to be removed. But Indian Evidence Act is so technology neutral as a legislation that it encompasses or it it takes into account all technologies. It is so technology neutral. So so we have to read the Information Technology Act as well as the Indian Evidence Act harmoniously. I find that now, since electronic evidence is a new breed of evidence, there is a scramble. The traditional principles of Indian Evidence Act are being overlooked, and focus is all on 65B and the electronic record, etc. So the harmony between the two laws is very important. So these are some of the presumptions and misconceptions. There's a presumption that Indian Evidence Act of 1872 must be an obsolete legislation. Let us look at something which is more contemporaneous in 2020, etc., etc. So that's my take on the presumptions and misconceptions about electronic evidence.
Thank you for taking time out for us. This entire session has been very helpful for our audience, especially the businesses, to understand the relevance of electronic records as evidences. Thank you.